In the rolling green hills of a village in KwaZulu-Natal, where the morning smelled of damp earth and wood smoke, there lived a young Zulu girl named Nomusa. Nomusa was born where roads turned to footpaths and electricity was a luxury whispered about, not guaranteed. Her home was a small mud house with a tin roof that rattled whenever the wind passed through the valley. Chickens roamed freely. Water was fetched from the river. Nights were quiet, except for the sound of crickets and distant drums from ceremonies long past. She lived with her grandmother, Gogo Thandika, a woman with deeply lined skin, strong hands, and a faith that had survived apartheid, hunger, and loss. Nomusa also had an elder sister, Zenil, who worked as a domestic worker in Durban city. Zenil sent money when she could, but Durban was expensive, and survival came before generosity. Nomusa was 14 years old, barefoot more often than not, and carried a weight far heavier than her years. She was poor, but more than that, she felt small. Despite her poor background, she had dreams of bringing hope to her community somehow. Every month, when Zenil came home from Durban, the village gathered around her like she carried the city in her suitcase. She wore neat clothes, spoke faster, walked with confidence. Children admired her. Elders praised her. Nomusa watched quietly from the doorway. She loved her sister, but she also felt invisible next to her. She felt as though life wasn't presenting her enough opportunity to better herself and come out of the poverty background she's from. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Nomusa sat outside grinding maize. Zenil laughed inside with neighbors, telling stories of tall buildings and bright lights. Nomusa whispered to herself, "God, why didn't you make me like her?" Her grandmother overheard. Gogo Thandika stepped outside slowly and sat beside her. "Nomusa," she said gently, "do you know how God made you?" Nomusa shrugged. "I don't know, Gogo. Maybe he forgot me." Gogo Thandika smiled sadly and replied, "No, my child. God never forgets dust. He starts with it." That night, there was no electricity. Only stars, thousands of them, stretching across the sky like promises. Gogo Thandika opened her old Bible and read aloud in Zulu and then in English. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into him the breath of life. She looked at Nomusa and said, "You see, my child, God did not create life from gold. He chose dust. And then he breathed life into it." Nomusa stared at the stars. Dust. That word stayed with her. Life grew harder. The rains failed. Crops died. Gogo Thandika fell ill. Zenil could not send money for months. Nomusa became the woman of the house. She was hardworking and ensured that the house and her grandmother was taken care of. She fetched water before sunrise. She cooked. She cleaned. And she prayed quietly when she thought no one could hear. One afternoon, exhausted and overwhelmed, she cried out while standing alone in the field. "God, you said you breathed life, but I only feel tired." The wind passed through the grass. No voice answered. But something in her heart refused to give up. Something reassured her that all will eventually work out. Nomusa was not only hardworking but also very intelligent. She was always one of the top performing students in class. And that also gave her the belief that truly she can become something useful in life, come out of poverty and also bring hope to her humble community. One night, Nomusa dreamed. She saw herself standing in a dry valley. Everything was brown, cracked, lifeless. She fell to her knees and touched the ground, and suddenly, breath rushed through the valley. The dust lifted. Flowers grew. And a voice said, "What I breathe into cannot remain empty." She woke up trembling. She knew that God meant the dream for her. That God had plans for her that will come to pass and she must just trust Him. Soon after, a local teacher noticed Nomusa helping younger children with reading. "You have a gift," the teacher said. "But gifts need courage." And she remembered that the dream, her courage will come from the Lord. One day a scholarship opportunity came. Her teacher showed it to her because she saw how Nomusa was dedicated to her schoolwork, but it required fees, travel, confidence. Things Nomusa didn't have. She almost said no due to that. But Gogo Thandika held her hands and whispered, "If God has breathed into you, don't suffocate what He started." Nomusa understood, and she decided to apply. When she told Zanil, her sister laughed gently. She was discouraging and negative towards the news. "Nomusa, Durban is hard. Education is expensive. Dreams don't pay rent," she said. Nomusa nodded, but that night she cried again. Still, she prayed. She trusted, she hoped, she had faith. Weeks later, a letter arrived. Nomusa could hardly wait to see what it said. She ran to her grandmother to open it with her. She clamored to open it. She was nervous but hopeful that it carried good news. Indeed, her hope was not in vain. Nomusa had been accepted. Partial scholarship. Boarding included. She screamed. She cried. She fell to her knees. Gogo Thandika raised her hands to heaven. "The breath of God does not return empty," she said. The time came for her to go to the city and resume her studies. Leaving home was painful. Nomusa hugged the mud walls, the soil, the river. She whispered, "I come from dust, but I am going somewhere." When she arrived in Durban, the city overwhelmed her. Noise, judgment, fear. She almost quit. But every time she felt small, she remembered Genesis. Dust is not shame. Dust is raw material. That pushed her to always do her best and to thrive in her studies. Years later, Nomusa returned to her village, not broken, but built. She came back educated, confident, rooted. She built a small learning center. Children gathered. She stood where she once felt invisible. And she spoke softly. God formed us from dust, but He breathes purpose. Never forget that. If you feel like you come from nothing, if your beginning feels too small, if your life feels overlooked, remember this. God specializes in dust. And what God breathes into lives.